Sorry guys, assalamu alaikum. I trying to set up delay the manding sorry. Let me know if you guys can hear me now. Come on, give me a thumbs up. You can react or with a comment. Can you guys hear me okay? Testing the audio. I don't remember. I'm kind of okay. Now come my alafen. Kaya alafen yung react. Yan yung basta la otra. Ibe diam ke fang wala mol game. Okay, so alaikum salam. I'll take that to main ko mol be moika. Wallahi fa mo get, kaya fa mo get. Baraka back. Musa fa na baraka number. All right, so be mol be kondona ka keta fa man dungoti. Kul siade bankile. La idol kake bukati mandino. Okay. You make your plans and then put all your double up on so as a Kenya oja what in kana fama bondolo fana manjawya. Anyway, Facebook Live men later, men now they can join the conversation and I can even share it so it will be available for later viewing. So ngadun kacha kono bitu janimbe cool start la the main issue lofta men kacha la wala this tribalism men is being wielded. But janu we have an elephant in the room and it needs to be addressed. Jani mol baflo ko before we jump la rulal kudol kono fon la suo kono mantra tambari rew diam la wala. So nte bukan dablo kacha sifal kono. You know, men nyanta kumo moy la ka moy la men man la fe ka moy fanan mo be mu fasun ke bal so la nante te jiko go wala nyama ni ngaji ko I don't have an impact on something or na dablo je na fate tar la nyeje bu kan dablo je nyaaje ka mo fa am conservative wala institution o me molier lo wala culture la mbay la ado la mba ye mentara nyaatre mo ku jawji je ni kabla wol no. So when it comes to the party as well, UDP, silol levelari kelo kuol ganyame. Nenta manda korwa silol la, Natta roje fana, mol sina wajinenka. So wala nyentiko being right, ko tonya bebul, wati, wala tonya bebul, o manke nyentiko, I Kenya, o fana ni silo tara. It doesn't mean also okay, my opinion is right. There's a difference between opinion and ideology. Or between your ideology and your strategy. So nite mira nyaso ko kool nyanta tala tenne. Asike o muto nyal. Mol fana be sotla la be balale kan ko ha yeji me fatanda hakil maya ko molam to nyalam mol sebla no normal o musiloldi o mu ku kennol da ku kennol wulul. Bari mo nin kol ko mo munen fo munentinya mfonya. The strategy you adopt or how you present your issue or your opinion boy can lead to a problem. Wala mo problem dini mon ka wali ka wali nyaadi le ite ideology kendo so hani dino ni be mol sabala kan na nyaale ba me yalla ko alal sulo la mo di to nyaale wote mo be d'accord ala ni ba ke la ka ke nen silo la sila la bi je ka nyama ni ma ko nyama ka mol baya bala. So the same thing can apply to politics, you know. So being right doesn't mean that your strategy is not wrong in presenting your ideas. That's the main issue for me, number one. So you can have the right ideas and people will support it, but the way you present it in public is contrary to what people expect from you. So mol men yalan ko kube ni te mani ku bondi wala yo kuma fo me yalan ko te ajo ko nyeng ana tra to nyaabe bulla bari ya fo nya wala la tamandi nya amina ti nyaro wulula you reach out to them any diam ko ngani silo nga tamandi te wala even one the phone it you have an idea ko this is the way forward, present the idea. The people that agree with you will go with you. Those who don't agree with you will disagree with you. But state your position and go back to your corner. When the process nying, you develop process nata ko nyandelo ko taman la nyame no wato sida ital bak la nyame bak la wala nya. So katara nyim Facebook luolu nyo saba la ni daki je abe kar nyo la sadle ni me daki je ni ajabe dere nafi ko lam nda data wala membe menke la yak mo be la kube fon la bul bare hande sate ko ni bije isa fo ko kari sangara mo kilimbe o sate ko me alan ko ka fala no fota ma ko babla ka bula wala hada mayat mo men yalan ko te amira kube ni temale nyolo bal temale kanu bal temale teria bal temale wala ko mo de daw mi imake in public amake be fanande but there are people me yango in private ye contact ka fo ko albenye meke ka dame akula wulu la me yalan ko abe tiñarol samballa bandi mol wo sifa wol siata manke da mati mo jemal le oke mol bu ke lamay sa wo nyolo na faale o kuto nyoy na faale hada maya fam wol ni ko mo dala to nyaabe bul mol ya fo ko hay sabat so wala ko ka may defana satu ji isa ko ha ka da sanata nyawnya nin karo fo dam afana membabul membe mutarabul akatu je amanke ko to nyaate bul amanke ko bolote bul ak kelo ko nem fitino kurkurra wala kuol dol wulta akada kula wulute me yilla men wala akada fintidu la dol te me yilla men hani hakim membe janka faen na wa fala ko ha nyin kari football no kay for Ronaldo lamba fo Pele lamba fo Maradona fo be man coach ro ha ni wo coach ni wo player ni e bula filo ko al play it's a 90 minutes ki jelo coach si mata football ma because ñu ne football no at but muna na coach ka fa ko keten because ada nyaka kuol laje outside of the field ita memba ko ne nyabu kay ko manke ñu ka ko ngala fanu wala hani is a matter of perspective do be lor njaw nyaka menje anita nyaka menje mankele so no wa fele ko okay ni aju ben la karama fon la nta nyaka ñin ne ja ni tebe lor be danando e nyata wo jenol so kama nga kete bari ko to ke so anyo sabobe men tema ye continuer je te fanyon ndal fala nga go fly do fala ñe te fanyon ak ke ñaw ñe te fanyon so mo ke dablo automna de bela energy waste that's my position ndamantan dablo la je UDP is an institution e ko ikela ko taman ni ñame yaay tan mo bela ko ka kete na ni wato sir at the end of the day fango ni mel lafte to kala je ka fo ko lafte kala flag be araldi e to ki ni membe to man rok le to man rok mo taf la moy ko kanay to ke je wala kanay to sa fay so ñoo saba ko ndam ko ndabla ndo kon mo man sija but because it's an issue I just want to state my position because your ideology or your perspective might be right, your strategy may be wrong, and when people are trying to point to the strategy you're insisting on focusing on your ideology or your perception, that is the problem. So I'm not going to take sides. I'm not going to jump into it. Those who are on it, they can keep engaging in it. Ninga post I can engage with that post completely 100% away, not related to that issue. Nanyo hadamaya. Ajokolo ko ninterbe bol dro me alonko ni ko Allah akbar salwato sida ko kara Dakar. Ata Dakar. Ya fa okay, tabira jaar mo to soma bidu foso. Nal bendal yesi ale kaja na do mi wato sida dal do mi ngol ni salwato sida te salolo Somalia murna ale kaja. Tabita hajo te hajo mantina la badi ya tinya. Because bari yal balte so it's the same thing. Ninki subi je mayalon content I'm not going to contribute to it ndate tar laje mbe obla laje ni ku do sama na mayalon ko I can contribute nyo feal ni nyin kacha dul ngandab laje ngaw kacha ngabang nyin do membe je ngaw landi kara because I wali samal na wali ko don ndate ji. So that's my 100% on that. If in case anybody baje kam ko okay jani be diam la ku do la telephone ya ko be je mantra block menno so ga duna kacha ko wala monte ñing tribalism na concern especially wala the younger generation di nongol men yalla ko be duma la nga start nu wol mo me yalla ko siyo be sa ñetan sama ni lulu way duma la mo sa fa ko tamang ku jama kala mota sa fa man ku kalamata ka fa nyadi jawara la administration imam fen kalamata ji ya jame jamano e wulura wala kono o fon ita ku jama fono la moyenji so mo se si ya ko hakil ma ya ye fanyene ka ita ye mel long ye ta karandi men juma le karanda nga misalota jali jelle den kilo la ya jame ka jey dalla adoto na nundo ko woli ke sinni ma nyaadile den kilo lam ka tari ko le satanye wala jalol le ka tara marare ngala wala ka fanya ko nyine kata kunu nga kala fanyo la ko wol kalam to wala nyama so njoto la story long wala nyam safar la man siano television man soro nu internet man soro nu sabo mam ye ko record so nin sida nga mira bi del be nga mello ya jema la ko de TRC ma reveal be nga kalam dala because I record ba ni sida ya mira ba to nyantala ni sida ya mira ko kunu wo jalol me denkilo la wo denkilo le futa tantal ma bi nga foko ya jeme gambia la masala nu sanji ke malul ko man fe moy fo sejo bar ñol be denkilo la ya jeme e ba jeyir man fe moy ami bar ñol be denkilo la e ba jeyir ani ñi gambien artisul men be dalla jeroto na moy roto jalol me yalon ko ay ñi ñaake wole jalila jali yakaye ye denkilo la wol be mëna falantal ye wala perspective wala mandi ya jeme ma sa kendol bar bi nda ngala nako ku jama bi jaay menke tiñaro ay mol fa mol tora ku man tora jamal leke so wo history me ita ya soto abotana min to mafan that's one perspective you didn't have the full picture the same thing with Gambia's political history kabri ya jame natanati ke munati ke jawara tiña ka PPP man sakunda tiña ka kangole la ñing kama pour ga fan justify ko ndel la ñanta ke le president di Gambie so wala ku kende tijara be même fal kuti jabe même balance hani la ku keno na ba fula in a way me ya lonko abata ñi ñanda wol mu jaw yan so nite you rely on that ya adama barona na ya jame mol sabah fankanda ni wol sita wol fana the same narrative be wol promote kam ifana be la ñina ko ñinam toñaat tribalism tara na ta ñine a wulu Gambia ñine a sabata ndi Gambia ñine ba wajabe ndi kan Gambia and non me yalon koy be da ke gam politiko bi ni ajube 80% wala 75% or more Gambia di men be politiko kono bi men ka diama ko wala abe mo fondin kel men yalon ko ya jame jamano le wala la ya jame jamano be start la wato men atraital be dindiya so lo muna fono la moy Gambia kunun ko so dal nyanta men kala wala ke hakil maya ka itani lako tribalism is just a political tool 100% is a tool for dominance. Ibu kake fengo fenne kama wokola. But me ya be wulu wala music ni music well for the recent episode me I start wala ngabeng attack taro West Coast Radio and Peter Gomez baka challenge. So mbe use la as an example ka ita go nyim problemo be is based on economic interest, is based on political dominance or cultural dominance. It's as simple as that. From offended and no dalilo litan la mol to show you ko there is absolutely no tribalism in our country. To the extent that people make it look like, not that there is not bigotry. People are bigoted because they think it is camera ko. It had a kurupo kurugo taraje. Mo fi ngoli amene tella mo fi yalla fi sata cool bit. Tubabul bi men yamene ko tubabu ya kola fente kere me an ka nyaata. So ni dara mane kunda bo mo sifal tar la jelo kon tal mu man ni kol din tal la fi dara karñol es tara surwa kunda ba tar raje tara fula kunda ba tar raje momo menti nyanta titar la wolle nyanta nyanna wolle nyanta tesit la wolle e sisi fala wala ala ite tomo ay ke wol ay sama nan dunya ay blando bo mo sifal la ko nyina be kala ado de nyina be kala la silo so ka titar wala wo problem da wor ba ni astam bindu wala do yey fay tan ko okay ba on tam nyinati telefisara karñol to do fisamante aduna ko on yetti ñaaro samanan. So from that perspective ko man ko yamé telefisara mo doldi wala surwal yamé telefisara ñun doldi wala flol yamé telefisara ñun doldi ni en nal tari ko kono jube ito aussi faltar lay ba kabrum politiko adable je dron ay ada afana finditara because it's a weapon me yalon ko politician will can use. They are the most guilty when it comes to using that weapon. So the music industry now follow you traditionally bao atako molke e fansu molle fasa ibuke del dul fasa men yalan ko ni man tara kukele Nsafoko Gambia Kora was always there Kora be jele kabrin chuk sur wala kontingo be jele kabrin chuk ina tan dal kasen ka kundaldo gat la fala because ndago nyome kasen ka kundaldo la ñu mirawol be jele this gamba so their traditional instruments have always been there 100% of the time but with time music has evolved nim modol la ko dun tanyo ko men yalla ko ni manki aade kilomati wala musical instrument wala men bako guitar no sifal ngawol dabla ni na ko ko ni musangom la de kiloma ko guitar fon badantale so but basically just for analysis sake we have our traditional music lalo ke bañol lam men yalan ko purely 100% kora bu ka fendo bla kono wala men be bala fon ko so la ko la bala fon man ko dar wo be bulu je sur wala halam be bulu flow la riti be bulu so that is traditional music everybody had their cultural niveau use la jamani may ka denkilo la ni wo kamol la men yalan ko nsafu traditional jalia basically was it so music industry evolved alors evolution ko nyaadi le you band soul create wala ko men ka kora ko se damma ko ko kora ko sola muso be sira da kora bato ko sila bari me ya commence ntafo maybe that can be argued but jale ba ya start ka kora band create wala ko mare band dol be rano men joko tata de ngan salam band ñol ko you know ye dablandi but amanda wala ni nata ju Gambia music national troupe musical troupe la me alon ko kora ba ko no le balafon ba ko no le halam ba ko no le riti ba ko no le you know gambañol be ba ko no wala mi Gambia la adol be la ke kilindi ye music band create so music evolved wala nyama ko ñi manke ko ko se fen kilinda mat mais ko se fengol bula la ñoko no ñi ñami nga music ko create yeah so within that context you have bands like Gelawar, you have Soro Koto band, you know, Abdul Kabir Nyol Botawolto, Ifambandi band, Nyol Super Eagle, you know, Kumare band, Nyol Fajan, and Salam band, Nyol Fajan, all be creator, all so, competition on that was it. Jumal la band better at musician all the Mali Kafunyoma, bands all create, Nita Senegal Super at one, Nyol BJ, at Lemzo Jamano Nyol, you know, Omar Pen Nyol band, Chon and Ramdan, all be that is the beginning of modern music in Safono in our cultural context in the Gambia. Yeah. So band soul fana, jamani we bukala and then they start breaking up. Osifa la mikaje you know doli bondi for example Gelawar band ñol musangom ñol fintra wala kono then now Soto Koto band ñol Abdul Kabir ñol fintra wala kono Jaiba still now he's maintaining his band, you know, Tata Alamani men kafa kala kabrata bada Salam band safa sa man tarakirin kote. You know, so these things happen. But time and stuff in the you know late 90s early 2000s music sifa ko to je me ada blananga me music ko ñim dol create wala ko ka fa ñaaje sorry I broke my finger so I broke my finger wala na sitting up ba maninte but I'm good so 90s onwards ñing rap ko ye da blandi wala kon ne ala kilo wakan ti artist law yela follow fugitive band ñol lem born africans ñol lem penchami galaxy wol bebe ke keri nanu yaja so wol it started the evolution of music wol katara ni rap style musical like because of maybe American influence in the culture or because Gambia ka reggae mel la moy you know reggae culture fana influenced the born africans ñol and stuff like that rebellion ñol fana finta wol ko single artist or groups of artists wol fanaka you know wasifa le create but ne ajube la den kilo be gata lari ma fan kilo ñim rap style I don't know pop I don't even know what kind of genre you're gonna call it but those were the things that were happening so you have so many different people from all different ethnic groups but jamaji may ka den kilo lari mana English men somebody who stood out and became more recognized for example Jalex Nyol Sifa Okundu he stood out of that group mainly because he embraces culture and then kilo and wala mulka wala understand and then the beat also is very traditional so those kinds of people they stood out Nina the Galaxy crew ñom musango moding on just fonga I think he ended up almost being I think being solo so people followed him as well so those things they evolved and then they changed instead of they set a standard or they were the first standard bearers for okono crew ñol be wala kono you know like going back So in Savo, those were the pace setters. Then we'll call out and you do not fintina. You know, but the bunkanyol, estinyol, kafanyali, oboynyol, karanying, atagnyol. They were all in that second generation of rap music. So if you look at it, they all rap. But say for example, somebody like Jizzle doesn't rap. His kind of music, he might be one of these young Gambian musicians, but he has a different trajectory in his music than say for example ST. It's pure rap. Let's just say rap. It's exactly the same thing Attack Fanakameng. It's rap. So obviously those two people are appealing to the same crowd of young people that rap appeals to. So the competition would naturally be there. Why is Jizzle not a part of it? Let's just use that as an example. Why is Broke and Kombonka? Broke denkilola maninga kaonla, Kombonka kala maninga kaonla, ST kala maninga kaonla, Oboynyol kala maninga kaonla, but the music style is different from ST because it's not purely rap. So you know Beka kene maninga kaonla. So why are those people not complaining to maningo the mal support and when they are struggling compared to ST? But ngani most about for Jizzle Attack ST mainly because Jizzle is also popular, but Niata you in Nigeria no like Afro popular, but I think that's what they call it. I don't think look at you know, like this kind of like lover boy thing. You know, I don't have a problem with it. I'm just saying that's the example of his music. Yeah. So ST, I think he purely raps. Just get the lyrics and spew them out with the beat in the background. I think he does it in Mandinka. Attack does it in Wolof. So near Jube, all these bands that I listed from the 70s, from the 70s coming down, they all have their fan base. The fans only promote, the fans only support, radio will be playing everywhere you go. There was no feud there. So now, because you have the same genre, targeting the same audience as the other person, the only difference is his lyrics are in a different language than yours. Why is that a problem? Kabin time when I start catching in Kabana, you knew this was going to be the problem. Because it doesn't matter. Even in Menka rap Kijan, sometimes the lyrics they use are very contextual. Even though they speak English. So after start la world to go, attack audience women target, wala support la, wala promote la. Nabita International told him it will be based purely on how he is received by his audience or his fans. So now he sees ST as a threat or a competition that he needs to tackle. So how do you tackle him? Maybe, there's a difference in the language that we use. That is why he gets more promotion or more recognition because he sings in a language that I don't sing in. Using that as an example, purely 100%, this is an economic-driven agenda. It's the reason why we have tribalism in our country. It's a pure and simple. I want to use that as a segue into why I think that is the issue. Because Niajibe, nga start damando and go. Previously, Gambia janin jawara binanam wo monetun tuba maralo bekere. Janin tuba bol kanana munabekere no colonial like traditional institutions. Ibafala, Kayol, Bawol, Sin, Salum, Fladu, Nyomi, Europina, Jimara, wala bekere no. Mol yela se fol soro later like after say but mansolam, Nyomi Mansa Jara Mansa Kia Mansa, Jolofi Mansa and all that. All the way back to the Manding Empire, people ruled based on traditional institutions. Mobe nila territorial. Nobody was competing anywhere until colonialism came. So after that colonialism is when we started having all these issues. Yeah, if somebody wants you to fail, they will tell you to ignore your history. Because history, that's where you draw inspiration from. You draw inspiration from to show you that there are people in the past who are exactly like you, same culture, same background, same everything, who succeeded in this or that endeavor. You can do the same. So you draw inspiration from that. Or you learn lessons from it. In the past, this person who was like you did A, B, or C, and this is how they failed. You learn your lesson, and then you improve. So if anybody tells you to ignore your history, they want you to fail. Absolutely 100%, and you will fail. But Mali Kawal, If you don't know where you come from, you're not gonna know where you're going. The same thing, man. So why can't we just reflect on the past? Which is why it hurts me so bad when people start saying, kill the tribe. What does that mean? Just because somebody weaponized an instrument, it's kind of like saying, you know, let's get rid of fire because it burns down houses and stuff. If you mismanage it, yes. Your tribe is your identity. That's why your culture is preserved. Why do we have all these languages if God wanted us all to be just the same? But we adopted a system that tells us, oh, Gambia is a completely whole bunch of different people than Senegal. When we speak the same language, dress the same way, eat the same food, worship the same way, everything that we do is exactly the same. But we are told, you people are Gambian, these people are Senegalese, you are different. It's the same thing. Ni nata manega kunda kuol bijele ka ke nyame. Suru akunda fanan kelo kuol ke nyame. Fula kunda ke nyame. Wonena manke problem. Even the famous Kurugam Fuga maniko kavo, like before the Bill of Rights, Africans had democracy. Near Jalul Moiba when the Kurugam Fuga was taking place, and they named some fuller names. Sangare, Jakete, Jallo, they were present there. Niko Manding Empire doesn't mean completely 100% everybody in that empire was Mandinka. Niko Kayori doesn't mean everybody in there was Sere. It was a mix of people, and then you have one group that was dominant and leading. It's the same thing when you go to Senegal, but everybody speaks Wolof because that's the common language. Natta Mass is the same thing. Even people in Senegal in the north, when they are talking about Casamas, they start talking about, you know, the Kankurang or, you know, the Jola tradition. That's because that is what is prevalent in that area. There's no difference. So we have these issues that are always present in our country, and for economic reasons and the desire to rule over people, to have dominance over them, they started to weaponize it. So the language you speak is not the problem. I told him, so I'm going to mention his name before I jump into it. Another thing that is relevant is that example that he gave, which is Mondao. I post Dolagagafoko, you don't see the Akus in this whole tribal brouhaha. And he's 100% right. Immediately a light bulb went off. Exactly. We can use that as a perfect example of why tribalism is nothing other than a tool that is being used by people who want to dominate us. And nobody benefits from it but them. And that's true. So why is that? We should ask ourselves. Not that they are better than anybody. No. But when do you see people, you know, saying, you might have your personal encounter with somebody, fine. Which is what this all comes down to. If you have a personal difference with somebody, go after that person. Don't go after their whole group. So it's the same thing. That's not to say that the Aku people are perfect or that, you know, they don't have any issues. But no, in the wider space, or, you know, talking generally about this whole issue of tribalism, you don't see them mixed in it. Why is that? This is where young people need to learn to understand that your history is relevant. It is important. You need to embrace your identity, who you are. It doesn't make you better than anybody. It just means that you are different. You are who you are. You are unique, and you have something to contribute through your values, through, you know, your perspective on life. And you get that based on how you were raised. That is your culture. That is your identity. And its first manifestation is the language you speak. So there's nothing wrong with that. So why are the Akus not involved in all this mess? Nina Rajube Akus, we usually find them in Gambia or later Sierra Leone. You know, Gambia and Sierra Leone. Nigeria is kind of similar in a way, and Liberia, but generally Gambia. And the origin is basically after the slave trade, the emancipated Africans. So you can trace their initial appearance on the scene in West Africa generally to that. So why are they not involved in this? So on our side, the people used to have their own kingdoms where they lived, and, you know, did the things that they did based on their tradition and their values while commingling with everybody. That's another thing in Africa. When we dominate politically, we usually don't impose our values on people. If that is the case, everybody would have been one lineage by now. Nitara Mali, most of them will speak Bambara, even though you have Mandinka, Jula, you have Fullers, you have all kinds of ethnic groups. They usually will speak Bambara. In Senegal, they mostly will speak Wolof. In Sierra Leone, they all will speak Creole or Aku, because that's the dominant language. So why are they not involved in the Gambia? This is where the issue lies, and how politics use tribe and weaponized it. You see, before the colonialists came, Gambians used to be farmers. They grow their own food. They didn't rely on anybody for anything. Whatever you ikamoilo nunko nundomol manukuto ni wonat neka manukuto ban la ya fay wala ya tu ya ke la soti ko bungon mo. They used to grow the food that they eat, basically. So they were in control of their whole entire existence. They didn't need too much. The Mbolo Sira community comes together. They build a house for whoever needs that assistance. Yela fan sum paja sol de nen no mol bije sate o sate no mo bije sate o sate dar lal bijele farabol bijele. So it was basically subsistence living. Those people lived happily. They grow whatever they needed. Colonialism came because of the need for materials, raw materials, whatever. They encourage people to start farming cash crops. In school, they teach you about cash crops, mostly groundnut in the Gambia. So people turn their farms that they use, kanyol doku nundame, kintol doku dame, yayal mandiake, tiyokunkol. So they started growing these groundnuts and selling them. But if that is the policy across all of the colonies that the British were in, that means that competition is now starting. Senegal, the same thing. Groundnut is their main export when it comes to agricultural produce. That's why we compare ourselves. Senegal, because we don't consume that much groundnut. When we make it, we have to sell it. So people's food production went down and they started growing cash crops. Initially, it was good. But when the competition mounted, the sales went down. So that means less income for you. And then on and on and on, time later, people realized, well, I'm not making enough out of this farming. I'm not already growing enough food, so that means my labor and my land is distributed between cash crops and food crops. So my food crop production has gone down maybe 60% or more. So I produce 60% less than what I used to produce. Now I'm producing 60% of cash crops, and when I sell it, I don't make enough to buy the surplus that I need for the food that I'm going to eat. So essentially, it's the same people. You don't have any new laborers coming in Kanema. So say I can fall yellow sort of falifula. And when someone can fall yellow to fall war. So say I'm falling nanomen to the Yanta Balula man, I bob on Lamindo. Not your doku ninga wafi. You come so the Jabuka Falikilmasanoy. So say you still have a deficit of what? 3. So la balwot is timano. Because the same land, because land is limited. The same land maker use kila manu dokuje, mikela nyo dokuje, nyoni manu bukatra doku dula kila, just as an example. Now you don't have that because ya kuntula sai, ika tiyo fanan doku, purka waf. So sai tala bolu koleat. And then you're stuck in this situation. May along go okay. Ninganda bonit ya do ko fanang sort of no menga ken do fanang sort of la sila mekala nyadi. Just like in every generation, niyama mamanyol ka fangol keje ka fangol ja. They were once young people too. That's when they started looking for other opportunities. And what are those opportunities? The only industry available back then was people who were working along the coast. These dock workers, laborers. At the port. Men ko do ko sakotolam is all groundnut related. Wala men kata santo to tiol samanang ina na yabla ni kulungol ko na ifta nam banjo. Wala bagasol men tuwa wol ke bonan tuwa biye samanam porodo mol men kata rada bere siara je ka o bagasol jindina. Ota mo da malam do ko. All these things are tied together. It's all about economics. When you are in the West, remember America jang wala Europe, the first people they come after when there are bad economic situations is the immigrants. That is why they're taking our jobs. We don't have any jobs because of this immigration. We need to control immigration. And then that's the campaign. Immigration is why the economy is bad, so we need to go after it. You can only follow a scapegoat. So these people abandon their farms because they're not making enough as young people to take care of their families and said, I'm going in search of greener pastures. And that was to come to the coast. What was the coast? I'm trying to tie all this back to Mondau's post, which is 100% in agreement with, because you don't see Akkus in this whole mess of tribalism. And I want to make that point go, there's a reason for it. Not because they are better than anybody, but because how the thing was set up to show you politicians and people in power will do whatever they need to do just to get ahead of everybody else while they keep us at loggerheads fighting and killing each other, when traditionally we normally don't do that. And I'll give you an example, a perfect example of that as well. So it's purely a tool. So these people abandon their villages in the rural areas and their farms because they want better opportunities for themselves, and they all flocked to the colony. Because when the British came and finally declared the Gambia a territory for the British Crown, they divided it into the colony and the protectorate. The protectorate is where they get their produce from. The colony is basically their base. So within that base, all their activities are centered. Whatever they need from, the environment they get from, the rural areas, like, groundnuts and cotton and whatever they need. But when it comes to modern produce or whatever they want from Europe, that gets imported. So the ports become busy, dock workers were needed, and, people were needed for different manual labor endeavors within the colony area. Nico colony fana, it is Banjul or Bathos and Combo St. Mary. Well, now we have the term Combo St. Mary's division. Combo St. Mary's is part of the colony. And to distinguish it, you have a Combo Tua Banco and then Combo Santo. Combo Santo is basically everywhere else, going, to the rest of Combo and then to the protectorate. It's all considered the protectorate. So Combo was basically cut off in two. Majority of it was known as Combo Santo. But if you want to know Combo Tua Banco, for example, Cape Point Dabe or Lokon, Kajina, just along the coastline. So these people migrated from upriver Gambia, Kana Banjul, so that they can find employment. So here's another problem. You divide your farm between producing your food crop and cash crop. Now you produce less food. So that means your income has gone down. But because you're not making enough from your cash crop, you decided, I'm going to find labor. You go into a place where they have no land to farm on, because Banjul Nyajibe, where can they farm? Banjul is an island. Manu Dokol Wekelaje on a very small scale. Very, very, very small scale. Menkamano Dokuji. But now man can bay, lele bije saltwater intrusion, so it's not ideal for farming 100%. So those people rely on the manual work that they can do at the ports or within the from the colonial administrators. That is also their source of income. So suddenly those people are seeing an influx of, let's consider them immigrants from the provinces coming into Banjul looking for jobs that they are already doing. So let that sink in for a minute. Either you leave your farm because you don't have enough, which is justified. Alay dunia fata fata la, ni harje man firinjan to tar lado juwe sa hasike harje firingi. So economic conditions force those young people to migrate into Banjul. And when I say Banjul, I mean the colony. Those people are also now getting scared. Okay, we have all these people coming from the provinces and they need jobs, and the same jobs that we are looking for is the same jobs that they are looking for. So nintakata num pororo, nka man do no lekeje, wala nka let's say man wala nka wala import nang, nka man bodo 50 le duni every day, man bodo ka $5 le dinaji. So 50, that is 250 in Medjila Nuwala Kajinaise. That's because we have, 10 laborers. But now, because of these people coming from the provinces, we have 50 laborers. So instead of Manboro Talulu, Nkawajinditilo, Nkajalegendisai, Manboro Tanelu, that means my money has gone down. How much I make is going down. You blame that problem on the person who came and claim the rest of the job. So because alta labi jawala na kundu ko men ka sort of biya because of the say, marse ko leata la wala poroto ko leata la because muka duni jamat. So now your cost of living, it stays the same, but your income level has gone down. And you're going to find somebody to blame for that, which is these people who are coming to the colony. Sadauda is the least tribalist person you will find anywhere. He never used it as a tool. He never even, appealed to it in any shape or form. But if you read his book about Folene, there's a section there where he says they used to get taunted, even on the streets in Banjul, of like Sandongo Alse. If you look at the ethnic composition of Banjul, it's mostly Wolofs and Akus. And then the people who are coming from the provinces, even though they are mixed, you have Fanafanas there, you have Fullers there, Asamusa Kamaranyol Sifal, Muflo, the Fafamanyol family, those are Fanafanas, and then you have Mandinkas, but predominantly Mandinko Lesiara in Gambia, coming from Badibu, Ki, and Yol Sifal. But Nitel Gakafa Sandongo Alse. So you have that ethnic composition of mostly Wolofs. I mentioned the Akus because they are present there, but they are not involved in it. The reason being, let me get into it now to show you. The reason being, the colonialist government had a policy of education in the Gambia. Those of us who are in America, we are familiar with the FACO. It was criminal to educate black people. They did not want black people to learn to read and write. It was completely criminal. So they adopted the same thing because the more people read, the more they become aware. And the more they are aware, the more they resist what is unjust towards them. So they had that hands-off complete policy about educating the people, which is why their whole entire colony, the protectorate, there are no schools, there are no means of educating. In fact, the few people who learn to read and write or become educated in the Gambia, mostly missionary soul. Which is why you find a lot of people who, in the early days, were easily convinced to become Christians because they went to mission schools. Which is also another reason the level of education in the country was low at the time because whether they are Mandinkas or Wolofs, they don't send their kids to school when it was first introduced because the people educating them were Christians, which means they have different values. But to encourage them, we have schools like Mohammedan School. Just to tell them that you can, send your kids to school. And which is also another reason why they introduced Islamic studies in our curriculum during the Jawara days, to encourage people to send their kids to school. We can teach them. This is just a means to educating them. And also, while they are doing that, they can learn their religion. So it started going up. Which is why also the people advocating for equal rights and women's rights, one thing they need to understand is the Gambia is a traditional society. When it comes to education, people can, when schools started expanding in the country during Jawara days, there were very few, not too many schools, primary schools especially. They build them in certain areas. But once you finish primary 6, you have to go to middle school. At what age do people finish primary 6? As soon as they enter their teenage years, 13, 14. Because you start school at either 6 or 7. So during that time, there was no middle school or high school or secondary school around your area, which means you have to travel to Banjul to go to secondary school. Transportation was so hard, it means you have to stay with somebody who is close to your school so you can go to school. Then they know only primary 6 bank, the parents take them out of school. Why? Because at that age, you are, you are getting the age of maturity, and now they want to send you away to go and stay with a relative who's probably a distant relative, and you are a girl. I'm not going to do that because you're going to bring shame to the family. So your education was as far as you can go in your own community, which is primary 6, you drop out. Because your dad is not going to send you, or your parents are not going to send you to a faraway land just so you can get education. So this contributed to the low rate of education for women. Some parents will totally say, primary 6 so before I just, waste half our waste in school, she will just stay at home. There's a reason why people do the things that they do. We just need to understand the context that they operated in for us to be able to understand their mindset and respect it, and then give them the alternatives. So that's just, by the way, education was mostly from the missionaries, and they were concentrated around the area that they can have access to facilities, which is the colony, which is where the administrators live. The only exception to that was they would build schools far away, maybe because they have cars back then as missionaries, they can, drive in distance. So in Fonyi, you have Jamenyo Taro School of those mission schools that they had there in Buyam, I think. The only exception is Armitage, because they needed these local chiefs in order for them to administer properly. They built schools for them up country as well. So Armitage was one of them. But essentially, education was limited to a handful of people. The Akos were descendants of free slaves, so they have that access, and because there's similarity in religion of Christianity, it was more accessible to them to start with. This is why they dominated the civil service back in the day as clerks, menial office work, because they can read and write. They had that advantage over everybody else. So while people were fighting for, Porto Doku, how many dock workers and stuff, they were not involved in that because they had the ability to read and write and they can help in the offices. So there was no competition there. This is where they are not involved in any of this whole issue, because they, let's just say, develop themselves. They have that access to be able to read and write, and the colonial administration, they couldn't bring everybody who could read and write from Europe, so they had to rely on the local population. And the first people that this was accessible to was the Akus. Not just the Akus, but mostly Christians, which is why the first earliest participant in Gambia's politics also, if you look at it, P.S. Njai, Wolof, but he is Christian. J.C. Fay, Syrian, let's say, but he was also Christian. These were the people who dominated. Edward Francis Small, maybe he was Aku. So these were the people who dominated the Gambia's landscape when it comes to, let's call them the elite or the educated people, because of that access that they have. So they will not get involved in this whole mess when people are fighting over these meager resources of, I'm no longer making enough money at the docks. So this animosity grew between the people who are coming from the provinces and the people who are based in the colony. And if you look at it from an ethnic composition instead of, origin, you will see mostly the people in the colony. Now that we took out the Akus and the Christians who are not, Aku, now that we take them out because of their advantage, thanks to the education, it's left with what? The Wolofs and the people who are migrating, who are majority Mandinka. Which is why in Mandinka communities you will hear stuff like Banjul Surwa, because Surwa is not just in Banjul. You have the Fana-Fanas, as we call them traditionally now, in the rest of the country as well. We all live together, we mingle together, we do things together. But Niko Banjul Surwa, they are trying to make a distinction. Those were the people that they came to meet when, during their migration into the colony area so that they can find jobs, and those are the people they encountered. Those were the people that they had animosities with. It's all based on that economic foundation. Look, if we ridicule them, they will not feel comfortable, they will leave, so we'll get our jobs back. It's not because of any underlying tribal thing. And the example for that is Jawara. Payoma, Meja Anko Jawara, Atali Jawara Samanam Banjul, to put him in school, was a trader who travels from Banjul Golem, Akata Sandoro, Kabagasol Nilijo Kasambana. And in Jawara Farmer Nyolo world, there's no family relationship there. But he saw the potential in Jawara because, Asutiara Farmer. So as traders, while they are sitting discussing, talking about, elder stuff, the Kachala and Isiba, you can never go on Korosuro. So I Jawara Koros, he has potential. Akafa ma ngoni mbita Banjul na bita alpura ifna sekarang asa tuba karang kabao tuba karang is the future. He convinced the old man Jawara, even though aninyi mandem fen Payoma Jalo, I think is his last name, and Almami Jawara, even though mandem fen a sondai idea. Who does that? Just think that for a minute. Nite amira ko itela fisara karati alla ado la karola la kenya la karo itela fisara wori muna ne beti ngodi la la naina. I only have one kid and I know how I feel about that. Like, who parts with their child and sends them to a faraway land with somebody that you just met on a trade route for him to raise him for you. That was how cordial people's relationships were. They don't think along these lines of no. If Payoma felt like, okay, we need to dominate these people, he's not going to proposed to educating their children. If this guy also feels tradition is better than, or values are better than these other people, I'm not going to give him my child to raise him for me. But that was not what happened. These two people understood each other. They valued each other. And what Payoma did, what did that lead to? We all know the Jawara's history is basically Gambia's history. So let that sink in for a minute. All this brouhaha is based on nothing but that. Economic interest. So this is where the country was. Those people who were complaining about their jobs being taken by these immigrants coming from the provinces, they started taunting them. If we mock them, if we make life difficult for them, they will not want to stay here. They will go back, and when they go, we'll get our jobs back. That was the open hostility. So those people experienced that. Of course, when they go back, they're going to tell their people what they encountered. And out of context, it's going to make it look like these people think they're better than us. Because nobody in Gambian culture, especially Mandunko, Jurna, Malafa. So that's where the animosity started growing. And then it became worse. So imagine young Jawara growing up in that. He was not even considering presidency, and he just came as a young kid, let's say, not even a teenager yet, to go to school. And he encountered that. So all through those years, he was going through that, being a part of it, or a victim of it, if you like, until he graduated school and got the scholarship to go and study, and then came back. All throughout that time, there was no representation for the people from his part of the country, which is the provinces. And during that time also, within that time frame, Second World War happened. When Gambians went to fight in Burma along the West African Frontier Force, they get some exposure. There were Nigerians in that contingent, Ghanaians in that contingent, Sierra Leoneans in that contingent, and Gambians, because that was the British West Africa. So young people always talk about what's going on in their country, and that was the time for the agitation for independence for Africa. So when they came back, they had new ideas. And what people were talking about from those countries, they saw that, it's time Africans are fighting for their independence in other regions of Africa. We're about to do the same too. So those movements started, but it was through political means. So how are they going to wield that political power in order for them to be able to fight the British and kick them out? So they needed people on their side. But with the British also understanding, there is agitation for independence and they still want to maintain their grip on the country, they started creating opportunities for elected office within their various colonies. That's why we have the Legislative Council, the Executive Council. And these places were dominated almost 100% by the people who were educated and who are almost have 100% of them from Banjul. When we say Banjul, we mean the colony. So P.S. Njanyol will be part of the Legislative Council. You have J.C. Final, all these names that we know from independence. Just because they want to give them a semblance of independence and involvement. So, for political reasons, let's say, they were satisfied with that arrangement. That is the politicians of that day. Despite the fact that majority of their compatriots in the country were not participating in any political activity, they were okay with it. As long as they can advocate for what they believed in or for whatever reason, being a part of the system. So the colony was the only place with the franchise, but even though it's not 100%, you had to be a compound owner, or as they call them back then, yard owner, for you to be able to be eligible to vote. Those in America will understand how voting restriction works with this whole colonial setup and how they're trying to suppress voters. In fact, it is happening now in Texas. We want as few people to vote as possible so that we can maintain power. And it's usually among demographics like race. So back in the day also, to give them a semblance of political power, they say people can vote and be voted for into the Legislative Council, but only people who can vote were yard owners. So it doesn't matter if you lived in Banjul or not, the yard owners were the only ones who can vote. But the movement was gaining speed. You hear in news, you've been exposed to this whole thing from other West African countries. So the movement started in Gambia too. But again, ye fanya nka juma level lo antali. Karana man siasa ngol. But another thing that happens when people migrate, well, and they form associations. We have them in the US. We have them in Jarankol Yakamami. I think it's Jarankol Lamia. They have an event in the UK. So when you come to a different environment, you create associations and support groups, social groups, where you all interact with each other. So civil finance to no. Bafla Lila Rasul Kafo, Badibu Kafo, Kombo Kafo, Nyomi Kafo, you know, Sandu Kafo, so many different kafos, like depending on where the people are from, they seek each other out, find each other, and then they, you know, join their efforts and their resources together to help each other out. For example, Nibi Mo Banda, Ikalefle Murunda La Molka, in the Mali and so those associations were created, but there was so many of them depending on region where people came from. That shows you it's not because Kafalanko, we are going to be the same. No. It was based on regional interests. So out of those associations, they were trying to see that's when Jawara returned from the education trip that he went to in the UK. So many alanko currency falke, they co-opt them into these associations. Karata bata bara jalal yal fa nasan don kolle moral ngi dablan ye sa yeke na klakol ni nyen safer la di kam makoy nintu wabol tema communication. But the same thing that Payoma saw in him came out to be displayed. Wala te nyen jelo ko okay. Alto bebe nyen ku kilo mon la coming al be for central al be, you are all facing the same challenges. The Fanabata Central, you know exactly what that is. Instead of al be trafata, why don't you all come together? Ali association ba killing form. Exactly, like the Compostela Association. So that is how the Protectorate People's Society was born. It combined all the people from the protectorates into one big umbrella association or society, Protectorate People's Society. So now it has political weight, especially with the backing of young people from the provinces who are educated now and just returned from England with their heads full of these revolutionary ideas of independence from colonialism. So once that was accomplished, you almost somebody combine into one Protectorate People's Society. They see the potential. Look, our people are disenfranchised. If we're going to have any impact on anything that's going on here, the first thing we need to fight for is for the people to vote. So imagine all that time, the people who are in the Legislative Council were not advocating for provincial people to be included in the franchise or whatever. More melo. Now man can say for the many they were handpicked by the colonial government. So the Protectorate People's Society started this advocacy for the rest of the country to be franchised so that they can participate in the elections. And that is how they won that battle. And now the whole entire country, whether it's protectorate or colony, they had the right to vote and choose people. So imagine who they're going to vote for. The same people that brought the franchise with them, the same people that advocated on their behalf, the same people that are from the same place as them. Because they saw them, they recognize them, they know them. Which means the old guard politicians are done. Because here's a new force. You are just the colony. Just imagine the Gambia, the entire country, the Gambia, against Banjul alone. What chance do they stand when it comes to number of votes? None. So they started getting angry because now they're taking our power away from us. And who are those politicians? The likes of P.S. Njai. And even before the Protectorate People's Society was formed, we see a semblance of that divisiveness, not divisive in the sense, but an attempt to at least make a inroad into the political sphere. Gaba Jahumba. He formed the Gambia Muslim Congress. Why would he call it Muslim Congress? Because look at all the politicians around him then. They were all Christian. All the people advocating in politics, being active, they were all Christian. So when he said Muslim Congress, and they were appealing to the Christian and Aku communities mostly. So when he said Gambia Muslim Congress, with that Muslim in there, he gets the sympathy vote. So he was trying to make a niche for himself in that political base, as small as it is. So you can say that was the first manifestation of sectarianism in our politics. Maybe not ill-intentioned, but because he sees things differently. Muslims have no representation here. All these people that are advocating, even though Gabi Jompa is Wolof, PSNJ is Wolof, but all the people who are in politics now are not Muslims. So, we're just going to jump in and be the representative voice for the Muslims. Maybe there's no ill intention there. But it already carved out a niche to show people, go, if some of you are different, this is where you need to be. You see how these things play out. But now came the PPS, Protectorate People's Society, succeeded in getting the franchise to the rest of the country. That means all of you are now swept away because the power of the provinces is coming into the political playing field. And those people, they know no politician other than the PPS and the members of the PPS. So now there's a new enemy, the PPS, Protectorate People's Society. We need to go after them. And what is the easiest way to target them? These are provincial people, Mandinkas mostly. Tribalism was born in our politics. It's as simple as that. We need to go after these Mandinkas because they're trying to dominate now that they have political power. And maybe there was a bit of fear there too because they know the history of what happened to those people when they migrated to the colony. Imagine now if we win independence and they're the people who are going to be in power. Where do we start? We have no chance with them because they already see us a certain way because of what they experienced during their time here. So the rhetoric was mounting. If you read Bakri Rice's book, there was an interview he had with PSNJ, and the things he said there, I'm not going to repeat here, I shared them one time. It was very unsavory. But it was born out of the need for political leverage. Whether he believed it or not, that's, something he will have to confess to, or, we cannot verify that. But he said those things about Jawara and his Mandinka origins. It was to seek political leverage. But the fact of the matter is these people, they opened up the country for everybody to participate, following the footsteps of E.F. Small, no taxation without representation. Why are you taxing these people from all over the country, but they have no voice in how you make the decisions about their lives? So there was nothing wrong with those people going about advocating for the inclusion of everybody in the country. And they did. So now they became a political force. That's how they transformed it. Since we can use this, we can use our power as a Protectorate People's Society and influence the government so much that they now change the constitution so that our people can vote. Maybe we have some political force that we can, carve out of this. Protectorate People's Society become Protectorate People's Party. They registered as a political party to jump into the political playing field. That's PPP. That's the story of PPP. And the subsequent elections proved their point. The people chose them over the existing establishment politicians. And that led to bitterness. During that time too, maybe people said stuff that was unsavory because that's politics. People say stupid things sometimes. But now that, the Protectorate people also see their potential, like, okay, we're going to win political power, the table started to turn. Exactly, the colonial policy of divide and rule, apartheid basically, is what led to this. If everybody was educated and the franchise was open to everybody, but that's not in their interest either. So it all comes down to power and influence. That's it. Nothing else. African societies are not built on that. We're built on values. But then we have this colonial system imposed on us that seeks nothing but material wealth and power. And they taught us how to get that. And then we embraced it. Well, at the top of the hour, I said, I didn't hear an hour. I said, like, if somebody tells you to ignore your history, they want to dominate you, they want you to fail. If you understand God, this is how they manipulated us and led us down this path, we can undo it. When we talk about this whole issues of tribalism and we all get frustrated, everybody started talking, look, like we all marry each other, we all live together, there's Santa de Kutfen, and it's all true. That's because traditionally that's who we are. We don't see each other in light of that. We just see a good person, we embrace them. Just like Payoma accepted Jawara to be educated in his household, and Jawara's dad said, okay, take it. You just see a good person and know he's a good person. It doesn't matter, what language they speak. That's how we are raised. That's how our value systems are. So because the colonialists came and weaponized it, now everybody's jumping. Kill the tribe, tribalism this. Let's undo what they did to us. That's where the solution is. If you say Mandinkas this, I'm going to get angry because I am proud of who I am. It doesn't mean I think I'm better than anybody. That's who I am, and I am proud of it. I know there's nothing wrong with being who I am. So anytime you say that, it doesn't matter how objective I am, I'll be emotional about it. And when people are emotional, generally, I thank God I don't have that emotional reaction to stuff. I approach things with a logical, rational approach. I might show emotion. I might get emotional in the process, but my launching pad is always rational. I try to be, at the very least. I might get frustrated with you and show emotions, which is a natural human thing. But when they throw all these things at us, maybe out of frustration or because we need to learn our history. And that is also a challenge, like a big challenge. Why? Because it's not recorded to a certain extent. We have to rely on third parties like Barclay Rice coming to the Gambia during those independent days to write about the story. Otherwise, everything is suppressed. How much can you learn from GRTS when it comes to the history of the Gambia and how things used to be back in the day? Those files are probably all gone because we don't value it. But unless we go back, which is why, Alaji keeps saying it, this colonial space. The whole mentality, how we look at the world, everything is how the colonialists imposed it on us, and we need to change it. If we don't change it, we're not going anywhere. You see the problem as tribe when the problem is not. You don't attack people's tribes and expect them to sit down. They're not going to do it. You're only going to get pushed back. So that colonial thing, going back to what Usman said, our problem started with that. So now here is a political force from the provinces advocating for their own inclusion in the political process. But when the doors were open for them, they had political office now, they look among themselves, who are we going to select to be the, Secretary or Minister of Agriculture? Who are we going to select to be the Minister of Foreign Affairs? They started picking, and they realized the number of people educated from the provinces are actually small. So we have to rely on the people who are already educated within the system. They understand it a little bit more from the colony for them to help us, build this Gambia that we want to take away from the British. We need those people. So they're going to turn to the same people, which is the people that were afraid, okay, if these provincial natives get the power, we are done for. So now here's an opportunity. In fact, they need us. They're going to rely on us. Okay, let's join them. So now that they're going to rely on you, you might go in there with a little bit of, this is all human psychology, with a little bit of, okay, maybe once they have all the educated people they need, they will just get rid of me because they don't need me anymore. So before that happens, I'm going to fence myself in by bringing my own people also to help me out. So if I'm not there, at least have somebody in the system. Cronyism is born, nepotism is born, corruption is born. And then that led to anger also. PPP Bamboo from, its earlier days. We campaigned on foot, on bicycles, going around the country. Now that we have independence, they're giving all the positions to the people from Banjul. And when they say Banjul, they see ethnic identity as well, because that's how the composition was. So they started getting angry at the PPP. How can we do all this work? We see the example. When Barrow was first elected president, people kept asking him, are you going to hire people from the APRC? These are the people responsible for all the destruction in this country. That was the question they kept asking him back then. 2017, go to the videos and check. Now that you have government, are you going to hire people from the PPP? Because there is that suspicion there, that animosity. We just need to reflect. Let's not just follow the crowd and screaming and yelling. APRC was responsible for propping up Jammeh. Jammeh is evil. So now that we have a new government, those people should completely, in fact, ban the APRC. We don't want them anywhere near power. That's what we were saying. So you can understand the provincial natives also being angry. We fought this fight with all the denigrations and Santonko say Su or something like that. With all that, now they're going to give them the positions that we, kick the British out of. We need to be, rewarded also. But Jawara being Jawara, he saw that this country, in order for it to move forward, we need people who can actually man those positions. It's not just going to be out of political patronage. I'm going to hire people that I know can do it. He actually said it in his book. Even one of the last colonial governor of the Gambia told him, don't be in a hurry to Gambianize your civil service. There are some experts who have been here in the civil service. Retain them, let them train the new batch of Gambians coming in before you hand over. Even that was not welcomed by the people from the colony area who were already educated. Why is he keeping the British? We kick them out. They need to all go. So those also have their beef. They all need to go. We need to, Gambianize the civil service. But he knew there was truth in that. Like, if I kick all these experts out who've been in the civil service, even though they were our colonizers, we can still use them, their expertise, to help guide the process to where we can fully Gambianize. But the educated elite saw that if one British is present in the civil service, that means one Gambian is not going to be there. So they also got angry at that. And then the provincial natives got angry at the PPP. Why? Because we fought this fight, and now you're hiring people from Banjul who used to taunt us, and now we're not getting the positions. So the push and pull started. Which is why when Jawara fell out with Sirif Diba, I think that was in 1975, about 10 years after the Gambia's independence, most of the provincial people flocked to Sirif Diba. Because there was that deep-seated, anger at Jawara for hiring people who never contributed or lifted a finger towards the campaign of the PPP in unseating the British government. The credit for that, mostly 95 to 99% of it goes to the PPP. So those people got angry, and then when eventually, because of politics, him and Sirif had a falling out, and Sirif formed NCP in 1975. Most of Badibu went along with him. He had inroads in Kiang, he had inroads in Jara, not so strongly, and then Bakau, which is traditionally, Bakau was divided, Cape Point and all that was part of Kombotuba Banco, and then the rest was Kombasando. They also joined him. Because why? We fought for this change, and here we are. Trying to read that part there. Oh, okay, yeah, got it. So yeah, basically, there was that element which I talked about also, like education. People were reluctant to it in general as well. It was not a give me your child, I'm going to take him, and then he accepted it. There was some reluctance. Of course, the moms are also going to be involved, and nobody wants to send your child away. So there was a lot of issues there. But the bottom line is these two people trusted each other enough to say, I'm going to educate your child because I see potential in him. And then the other said, okay, I trust you enough that you're going to take care of him. I'm sure if he was a girl, it was not going to, Jawara was a girl, that was not going to happen. Unless she got married and taken off. So this was the issue. In order to move the Gambia forward, out of that sincere desire to see that the Gambia progresses, we've got to put people in positions who can actually man those positions and have them man those positions. And then retain some of the British officers to be able to train the incoming civil service. Until we are satisfied, then we can also let them go. But that led to animosities. So this is where the Gambia stood. That push and pull was there. And this is where the origin of it came. But Jawara, during his time, nobody's going to accuse him of fueling tribalism in that country. Nobody in their right mind. Unless they have a personal beef that they want to address. Nobody's going to accuse him of that. In fact, Yahya Jammeh, when he first came to power, what did he say? Mandinkas are their own worst enemies. Why? Because Jawara was here, they were the only people opposing him. Nobody else was. So if he was promoting tribalism, he would have been the favorite of the Mandinkas and nobody else. But everybody else embraced him. But deep-seatedly, people had some anger towards the fact that the things turned out the way they turned out. Without seeing Jawara was trying to hire people who were qualified, at least on paper, to man those positions. They saw that he excluded us, even though we were the ones who did all the heavy lifting, being the Democrat that he is. So nobody in their right mind will complain or campaign or say that Jawara once campaigned on a political or tribal platform. And being a traditional Gambian, like Usman is saying too, he didn't want to embarrass people, but when he sees corruption, he didn't micromanage, basically, let's put it that way. The thing that the soldiers accused him of was corruption, rampant corruption. But when they did the commissions, you'll find that directors, heads of departments, they amassed more wealth than Jawara ever did in his 30+ years. In fact, he almost lost his house in the UK, being a former president. If he had been corrupt, how much money would he have had? The only land that I know is his Fajara residence and his garden in Abuko, slightly opposite the airport. But you could say, like he was faulty in that he didn't prosecute or was not tough on corruption as it was obtaining in the civil service to a certain extent. But, that beside the point, nobody, since tribalism is what we're talking about, will accuse him of being tribalist in any way, shape, or form. Look at the composition of his government. Look at the policies that he implemented. Look at his demeanor when he was politicking in the country. Nowhere will you see a hint of tribalism in there. And then came the coup d'etat. It might have been in the civil service. Like I said, these people were afraid once these provincial natives get the education that they are seeking or the education that they lack, which is why they are not in the civil service, they are going to kick us out and hire their own people. So before that happens, we're going to put our own people in there. So cronyism, and then you start seeing a certain segment of society dominating the civil and public service. When you watch the TRRC, you would see the former permanent secretary, Ministry of Defense, was saying it. Because Sana was complaining about it. In the army, there was a clear bias against people from the provinces, because majority of the people in the officer corps who were responsible for promotion in the Ministry of Defense, they promoted their own people. That led to, partly to the anger, which is why the coup was instigated mostly by provincial people. In fact, almost entirely by provincial people. Sana's testimony, go to TRRC and watch it. And when they asked the permanent secretary, Ministry of Defense, he said yes. There was an element of, call it tribalism, call it regionalism, but people from the urban areas were preferred in terms of promotion more than the people from the provinces. The highest they got to was lieutenant. The rest were, whenever you hear a captain or anybody else, they're either from the Banjul area or related to somebody in that area. So that bias was there. That led partly to the anger in the civil service. So when they were saying it, it was not against the Mandinkas, being in positions of power and then cutting everybody else out. We can watch that TRRC to see. So that's how that is tied to that. During those first 2 years from 1994 to 96, Jammeh, if he says anything about tribalism, he was going after his own people. He said so many nasty things about his own ethnic group, the Jolas. To a certain extent, he was kind of self-blaming for their own plight in the country. We can go back to the archives and see it. Not that he's right, I'm just saying that's what he did. But when he was, during that time, he convinced everybody, by 1996, I'm not going to run for election anymore. We're going back to the barracks. We are soldiers with a difference. Then 1996 came, he changed his mind. That's when he started politicking. Remember I said when Jawara and Sirif Duba had a falling out, Sirif formed NCP, and most of the provincial natives who were kind of angry at the PPP government for excluding them became Sirif sympathizers. And because of that, being the main opposition, NCP, and the strongholds that they get in the provinces, Jammeh used to say, Jawara, Mandikol, Mufanja, Wallete, Jawara Bijan, 30 years, he told them Malaka oppose. But he leaves out that very important and critical part. They're not opposing him because he's Mandinka. But if they oppose their own, why are you now complaining if they oppose you and saying it's based on tribalism? There must be another reason to that. So after the coup d'etat, everybody was holding their breath like, okay, so just with the difference, they're going back to the barracks. Jawara is now out. Sirif Duba is the most prominent politician. So if Jammeh leaves, Sirif Duba is going to be the next president. People were holding their breath, waiting for that time. But when he was ready to launch his political bid, he also recognized that threat and he banned him. Banned the NCP, banned the PPP, banned GPP of Hassan Musa Kamara because he knew they had political capital. So now the people were like, what are we going to do? And if you look at the Jammeh around that time, the people that surrounded him, they even called him co-president, was Baba Job and Mandinka. look at the most prominent people who helped him establish his political base and his political movement. They were mostly Mandinka. So when he banned all those parties, he thought, okay, now I'm safe. Nobody who is prominent is going to be able to challenge me. PDIS was still there, but their brand of politics didn't appeal to the Gambians to that extent that they were seen as a political threat. So that was 1996. But because these political bases were all there, everybody, holding their breath, waiting for the transition to end so that Sirif Diba will be elected president, now realize that he's not going to be able to contest because the soldiers decreed that he cannot. So they got their thinking caps on and like, we need to do something. PPP is banned, GPP is banned, NCP is banned. These are traditional political parties. All their members and supporters were waiting for this transition to end so that they can jump back into the politics. What are we going to do with that base? Let's form a new party, all of us, select a candidate, and jump into the political race. That's how the UDP was born. The UDP was based off of the base of those political parties, PPP, GPP, NCP. After they had that meeting and they agreed, it's basically a sort of tactical alliance. Who are we going to select? Because during the Jawara government, we had a parliamentary system where ministers were also members of parliament. So when they banned the government and anybody who was once a minister in that government, it included a lot of the MPs as well. So they cannot select anybody from among those prominent politicians. That's where Lawyer Dabo's name was floated. He became famous in the 1981 coup when he represented Sirif Diba. That's how I even know about, that's how he was introduced to people like me. Like, oh, Sirif Diba loyalem, because Sirif Diba loyalem. That's how we know. Like, we don't know who he was, but Sirif Diba loyalem, and everybody like, oh, okay. He made a name for himself back then in 1981. Even that Kukoi coup d'etat was part of that frustration. What many people don't know, Kukoi was a politician. He ran on the NCP ticket in Fonyi, and then he was defeated. So after that, shortly after that, it was when he launched the 1981 rebellion. He was angry at the system. Again, the neglect of the provinces and their exclusion, because they were frustrated at every turn, whether they were looking for jobs or whatever. So that same grievance was what led him to politics. He was a teacher before that, I think. And then when all that failed, he launched a rebellion. But because of his ties to NCP, Sirif Diba was implicated in that coup. And Lawyer Dabo was his lawyer back then, defending him, not just him. So that's how he was recommended. Like, he's a lawyer, even here, most people who go to Congress or the senators or elected office for politicians, they usually study law. And when he was approached, the history. He tells you how it all went down and who he consulted among his people, and they said, you can accept it. He accepted to become the leader of the UDP. Immediately, those bases were all revived, re-energized, and like, yes, we have somebody that we can rally behind. I remember when I was the first rally in SL that they did, I went to it, and Wajuara was speaking. They said I was in prison when I heard that they banned the PPP, the NCP, the GPP. I was down, like I didn't know which way forward the Gambia was going, because now I can't think of anybody who can challenge the soldiers now, which means they're going to be in power forever. So he said he was down and downcast. But then when he heard that Lawyer Dabo was being selected, that's when he celebrated, because he knew they have somebody who is competent. So now Jammeh saw that popularity and he was like, oh, this is not going to work. We have to do something about this. That 1996 election, that was tense. There was not enough time for him to create a brand or a strategy against the UDP back then. So it was purely 100% intimidation, using the soldiers and state resources during his campaign, beating people. You remember the incident in 1996 at the Denton Bridge? That was a point of testimony at the TRRC. That was the reason why. Because this was in August 1996. We had elections, I think it was in September of 1996. Yeah. So it was a very short period of time. In September, but yeah, UDP was formed in 1996 August. That definitely is the case. But I think the elections that year was in September 1996. So he didn't have enough time to create a political brand that was going to be effective against this new force, because he knew the people who backed the UDP and what their political capital was. So it was purely 100% intimidation. A lot of people, in fact, believe that that election was rigged or stolen Because when they cast the ballots, there was no counting on the spot. They will take the ballots, put them on military trucks, and transport them to the counting centers. And nobody from the opposition was allowed on those military trucks. So you tell me, was that fair? You cast your vote, you count. The first time we did that was 2016, counting on the spot, and he lost. So if we gather the evidence, you will know that Yahya Jammeh actually lost in 1996 because military governments were not popular back then. Sierra Leone was at civil war, Liberia was at civil war. In fact, Yahya Jammeh and some of the other soldiers participated in that through the economic force to Liberia. So people were very wary of military governments. So when they decided they were going to continue, and then November 11 had already happened, Kartong attack had already happened, Farafenya attack had already happened, people were scared, like, we don't want military anywhere in government. So they were not going to vote for him. But because of that pure intimidation, like, these people are ready to die to stay in power. And the activities on that election night, the counting night, even though they did what they did, they were not sure, okay, we're going to win. They deployed soldiers to the house of Lawyer Dam. Thank you, Cham. So you'll see some people mocking him, during the 1996 election, he actually went into exile into the Senegalese embassy because they knew they were probably going to lose, even though they did all their strategies. So if that was going to be the case, they might as well just arrest the person who was going to be declared the winner. So after that 1996, Jammeh got so scared that these people have so much political power. If I want to win the next election, because another election is coming in 5 years, I need to change my strategy. That is why he disbanded. He said the ban is lifted on PPP, his ban is lifted on NCP, because he thinks if he lifts the ban on NCP, Sirif Diba will jump into the race, and when he does, all those NCP supporters supporting the UDP will go to Sirif Diba. PPP will form their own group, and they will all join the PPP political party, and GPP will do the same. The UDP will be split. So now instead of one big unified tactical alliance party, it is going to be 3 different political parties. That means APRC has more advantage. That is why 2001 election, all those parties were, the ban was lifted and they participated. So when he knew this was not going to happen, what did he do? He branded his politics around tribe. That was when Yahya Jammeh started. Look at the archives. That's when he started saying it's the Mandinkas. They are fighting me because I'm a Jola. He formed or framed his argument around that base. Or look at them, I never win in Bakau, it's predominantly Mandinka. I don't win in Badibu, it's predominantly Mandinka. You go to Kia and the same thing is Mandinka. But these were people who were Sirif Diba's support base. Expecting when the soldiers went back to the barracks, Sirif Diba would jump in the race, they would vote for him and make him president after struggling against Jawara for nearly 2 decades, 1975 to 1994. That didn't happen. So he started telling his kinfolk, we are neglected here. He called Kuko a patriot for his 1981 coup. Find the audios, it's somewhere. I can't remember exactly what occasion it was. So a patriotic citizen rose up in 1981 to topple the government because of corruption, and he didn't succeed. Kuko was in the Gambia during Yahya Jammeh's days, but Kuko couldn't align with Yahya Jammeh because he didn't believe in what Yahya Jammeh believed in. They invited him over, he came, I think, a couple of times. In fact, some people believe that he was poisoned. Jammeh wanted him on board, on his side, but his ideology was different. And he saw the tribalism. Exactly, intimidation was what they used in 1996. So, he used that tactic of tribe. We are sidelines, we've been marginalized. How many people do you see in government who are Jola and stuff? The same problem that the colonial period inflicted on the Mandinkas because people were not being able to access education back then was the same thing for all provincial natives, but he weaponized it. And now he turned people against each other. But traditionally, who do they marry? Jolas and Mandinkas usually, if you're going to say 2 tribes intermarry more than any other in that country, you will say it's the Mandinkas and the Jolas. But he brought that in and started creating animosity to the point that when you say Nko, you are a UDP supporter. So he was, with the support of the state machinery and his support base and his intimidation tactics, he was successful in branding and labeling UDP as a tribal entity, out to get him or out to get anybody who is not Mandinka. And that kept getting worse and worse over time and worse over time and worse over time until 2016 when he was saying, I will bury you 6 feet deep. You are not even from here. There was no Mandinkas in the Gambia before, I don't know, 1870 something. I will deport you to Mali. He was openly intimidating and insulting and threatening the Mandinkas and say, I will kill you guys and bury you 6 feet deep. You don't believe in Allah. And then I see the Fullers also trying to align with you guys. If you see somebody going to Jahannama and you join them, you're also going to end up in Jahannama. I'm warning you. He was open intimidation on every political platform that he stood on, which is why that guy who is now in NPP, which I don't like to say his name, was giving a speech to go and read it on national television, intimidating the Mandinkas. All because Yahya Jammeh want to maintain political power and he see the threat coming from one political party and he has nothing to label them against. In terms of their policies, he just used tribe because the leader of that party is a Mandinka. When one of the most prominent people in Gambian politics, Singul Nyasi, was a Jola, and they used to torture him for 2 reasons. You are in the opposition, we're going to torture you. Number 2, you are a traitor to your own tribe because you should be supporting Jammeh as a Jola. But they could never break him. And look at the composition of the UDP's executive. Yeah, Jallo was the first deputy party leader of the UDP before Aji Yamsek. You look at the composition, you can tell. We have eyes to see. We need to see that. And let these people stop dividing us along those tribal lines. UDP's policies, not everybody can agree to it. That's 100% correct. Everybody agrees in that country because Halifa Saleh is a decent person, that he will be a good leader. But we disagree with him in terms of policy when it comes to how do you think you can move the Gambia forward. Exactly, Black Kasongo, I can use that. People disagree with his politics. And then they will turn around and say, oh, it's tribalism, why they don't support him. Before he became the leader of the PDR, Sidi Jata was. Can Sidi Jata even speak Wolof? But their support base is still the same. So we're seeing all this. But because some people, they have relatives. I saw Kanaji. I'll name you here, Najarongo. We argue all the time. I saw him say it's hard to fight corruption in Gambia because either your relative or somebody related to you or you know is involved in it. That's the thing. People who have a stake in it or their relatives are in good positions, which is why Gambians keep saying, oh, you are jealous when you start criticizing the government. Why? Because that is a means for them to make economic power. This is why tribalism is weaponized in their country. People use it to wield political power and also for economic power. In the Gambia or in Africa, political power equals economic power because that's how you mooch off the public and make the money that you need. So we're seeing that happening. Tribalism this, tribalism that, tribalism this, tribalism that, when nobody was talking about it prior to that period. We were all one people, united in so many different ways, respecting each other's cultures and each other's values. So we need to recognize that these people are using us in order for them to get themselves wealthy and their families wealthy while everybody is poor. So let's say Adama Barrow is in support of a Fuller hegemony in the Gambia. Tell me if every Fuller is okay in the Gambia today, economically. Yeah, Jammeh was there promoting a Jola hegemony. Tell me if every Jola is okay in the Gambia today. Jawara was not a tribalist, but if they said he was a tribalist because he's Mandinka, tell me every Mandinka is okay in that country. How long are we going to stay here watching people come and be from poverty and nothingness to amassing public wealth for them and their families while they leave everybody else behind? But whenever they come, because of whatever tribe they belong to, we say this is the tribe that is benefiting everybody else is not. When everybody is suffering in that country. We need to get out of that mindset. When we see people in public saying things that are tribal, if I have access, I may not come out because that's grandstanding and, you know, condemning you. Yes, it's okay to condemn. People who condemn usually don't have access to the person they're condemning. If you do, you can tell them, look, I think you need to go out and apologize because what you did is wrong. But nobody should be there accommodating, entertaining, encouraging, equivocating tribalism. Oh, this person said it here, the other person said it. That doesn't make it right. Because if you think, oh, it's a gotcha moment for this particular tribe, it is not. Because the people benefiting are the ones who are actually within the system. So this is how he succeeded in doing that, that the UDP is a political, you know, a tribal party, is a tribal party, is a tribal party, until Barrow came. So now he has nothing else to offer. He's following in the same footpath that Yaya Jammeh laid for him. When you tell people, they say, oh, UDP is a tribal party, and you tell them, oh, to give you an example, here is where that example came from. Like I said, Yaya Jammeh was threatening Mandinkas with death, sending Black Kasongo to TV to insult the Mandinkas and saying all the problems in this country are from the Mandinkas. And then capping that off with saying, I'll bury you 6 feet deep, you are all going to hell. And I see the Fullers are also trying to align themselves with you. Here's my advice to my Fullers, because, you know, Sanawol Lemunti. If you see somebody going to hell and you follow them, you're going to end up in hell as well. It was during those times that whoever Yaya Jammeh arrested from within the UDP ends up dead. Solo Koromanyol Daboloko. It was at the funeral of Solo Koroma that Amadou Koro stood up and said, we fought this man politically, we've been fighting him politically, and he's been failing to silence us and keep us down using politics. But now he is threatening us because of who we are as Mandinkas. Nga kele politiko nga ko sifa beke jan wo mankanya sila ko na Mandinka ya na tawolo nom woto Mandinkolo kana fo mu UDP leti kana fo mu fendol ako Mandinko na tawolo nom wala nga wulu nga na Mandinka ya fasa. That's a reasonable reaction. That was the only time that was said. Find out when Solo Koroma died. So if you say UDP is a Mandinka entity, from 1996 up to 2016, they never used that phrase except that one occasion. And because of that, you say they're a tribal entity. You have another reason. I'm not saying you support UDP. I'm not saying you support APRC. I'm saying the narrative is skewed, it's wrong, it's all lies. It's based on nothing other than people trying to advance their own political game. Find a party you want to support and support them based on what policies that you think should be implemented in that country. But when they say tribalism, they're only pointing to one. And that's the UDP and the Mandinkas. But this is how our politics evolved. It's all rational, it's all economic in nature, it's all power grab in nature. It has nothing to do with cultural values or norms. Because tell me, which culture appreciates corruption, which is what the NPP government is known for? Which culture appreciates lying to the people, breaking your promises? Which culture in that country? Because that's what we are fighting against. Amassing public wealth for yourself and your family. If we're fighting against that and we are tribalists for that, now tell me which tribe are we fighting against that says those things are okay? So let us stop all this. Let's educate ourselves. Our narrative is skewed completely, depending on who the victors usually narrate history. They say the stories of the hunt will always favor the hunter until the lions find their own storytellers. Even if a lion chased you, or maybe, I don't know, a cat chased this hunter in the bush, he will come and say, I killed a lion, like Barrow keeps saying. I killed a lion when he was under a table. So when you ask them evidence of tribalism, that's the only one thing they will cite. And that was said at one specific occasion, for one specific reason, in a very specific context, that they completely ignore. But because it serves their political narrative for them to use that. They don't even know who said it or where it was said. They just hear the word Mandinkaya Fasadron and they go with it. That was the first time it was used. So molle nyanda kala mo hakil maldi. Ital benyim bela jam. Ibadungol tanatel. Nungol findite ka hani man findi kan fango la baluwa ba ko sonare. Momo ko gambe be diarim bi. Ibadungol palasor menke mako. So the young people, you guys need to know this. You need to understand, tribalism is a weapon wielded by people in power to stay in power. We need to take that weapon away from them to show them, if you're going to lead us, you have to have policies that we agree with. If you don't, whenever you open your mouth and say tribe, we're going to come after you. They've already started. You see that Sidinjai with his face looking like a rotten tomato. Starting laying the foundation for that narrative going into 2026. We all know exactly what they did in the previous election, including the local government elections. What were they saying about Talib? I'm using that as an example because you cannot name names now without them saying you belong to a certain camp. Who is inviting tribal groups into State House? And when we started talking to them or calling them out for it, they say, oh, the Mandinka Association. There's no such thing as a Mandinka Association in Gambia. Zero. They just gather a few of their supporters and say, come to State House and say, we are the Mandinka group. Who is doing that? We are all seeing it. We are all witnessing it. But we don't want to speak the truth in that country. Why would we not just keep wallowing in this poverty and incessant nonsense that keep getting thrown at us? Where do you want to see your country go? The only way it's going to go there is through the policies of the government in power. Nobody else. People can do all kinds of nonsense on the sides. The government in power, without the right policy and the right approach to development, nothing will change. It doesn't matter who is doing what on the sides. They are the critical path. And if that is not right, nothing else is going to be right. So you focusing on anything else is nonsense. It's not going to yield anything. It's just going to empower them further. It's going to keep you distracted while they keep doing what they're doing. Because there will be no consequence. The people who will give them the consequence is you, who is voting. And if you are not armed properly, you're not going to be able to vote against them. When Lawyer Dabo speaks, I say, yeah, but UDP, blah, blah, blah. When Hamad well, he's a part of the system. When Khalifa Saleh speaks, yeah, but, you know, since 1986, it's all nonsense. Is the government doing right by you? Do they have the right policies? No, let's focus on that. Let's force them to change policy. If they change policy and they are delivering for the people, nobody's going to complain. But look at security. Are you satisfied with the level of security in the Gambia, and then you're okay with your sister walking home from her job at 9 p.m., 10 p.m. when Nawek is shutting powers off? Are you okay with that? Are you going to pick her up because you're afraid? So they're failing in security. If we pressure them and they put enough security measures in place, nobody will be talking about that. Then we'll look at the healthcare. What are pregnant women in labor facing in the hospitals? How nervous are you when your sister is going into labor or your wife is going into labor? Why are you afraid? Do we not have nurses who are trained in the same nursing schools like nurses from Senegal and other parts of the world? Yes, we do. Why are you afraid? Because they lack the equipment. Who should provide it? The government. It's not UDP, it's not DOI, it's not anybody else. So I have my child now. Okay, Alhamdulillah, there's nothing wrong with the hospitals. We all can all celebrate. Now I have to put that child in school. What is the education system now? What opportunities do they have when they finish school? Oh, everything is handy dandy there. Let's keep it going. Fine. Then you don't have anything to blame the government for. But are you satisfied? No. Will you put your child in that school? No. Who is responsible for school administration and policies? The government. Why are you not talking about that? You're talking about somebody's tribe and how they facilitate tribalism when there's no evidence of it. It's all a distraction tactic. And we got to be smarter than that. We got to see things for what they are, be able to analyze situations, put them in their proper context, and understand core. We are the people with the power. Whoever we give that authority to exercise that power will be the person in charge. And if they know we're going to exercise our power in assigning that authority to them, they will behave accordingly. But as long as we keep this push and pull, fighting each other here and there, and trying to look and scapegoat and equivocate whenever anything happens, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. And the same people are going to keep, staying in power. Just imagine the president sitting there, because that's likely. That's when you would know that we actually screwed up. If we don't do something now. You are limited by the choices you have. 2026 is coming. The only people you can vote for are the only people who will be on the ballot. It's that simple. Nobody else is going to be voted for who is not on the ballot. It doesn't matter if you love Yahya Jammeh, you want to vote for him. If his name is not on the ballot, you're not going to vote for him. Find an alternative. Why? Because you agree, this government needs to go because they have failed. You do that by selecting somebody else. If enough people agree with you, that person is the best, they will win. If they don't, at least you didn't contribute to perpetuating the situation in the country. That's how we're supposed to think. Anyway, what matters, this was like a long history. I'll back I guess next time.